This is Jane Ryan, and I'm facilitating an interview with Norma Greenwood concerning her role and interest in the Women's Center in Marquette County. She will give a bit of her own personal background and then share her involvement with the Women's Center and her perspective on their mission. Norma, welcome, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I went to the Women's Center in 1973. I had been married and had 2 children and was widowed and started taking classes at Northern, had never gone to college, and was referred there. They were on NMU campus, just starting out at that time. They were offering a lot of services, and even though they had the big picture, they were working on huge issues, working on politics and legislation, working on wages for women, getting women into different careers that had not been traditional in the past, looking at equality for women. And I loved being exposed to all of that, but my true experience with the Women's Center was so much smaller, so much more personal. And I had grown up in a rather difficult situation and married young and had children, and then my husband died when he was only 27 and I was 23 and had 2 little kids. So I was never going to get married again. I was going to be this independent person, and started taking classes at Northern. And if it weren't for the Women's Center that helped me so much with my own self-esteem, which needed a lot of work, learning about, in steps, self-awareness, even becoming aware of my upbringing and my growth, and to get me to the point I was, then self-acceptance, accepting that, and then self-confidence in accepting who I was, and reading from one of the brochures they had at the time. The Women's Center is based on a belief that growth is a continuing process. Every person has a set of strengths and talents and abilities uniquely their own. Our goal is to help you find out just how much you have going for you, and to help you develop your own realistic plans for utilizing your potential. So all of that was new for me and exciting, and met wonderful people there. And for the first 2 years, I took every workshop that they had available, and learned about assertiveness training, which I needed. I did crazy things. I look back now about buying things from door-to-door salesmen because I didn't want to hurt their feelings and say no. Family members, not really taking control of what my day would consist of or what my life consisted of, just reacting to things around me rather than making decisions about my own life. And then learning these wonderful communication skills. Assertiveness training helped with that also, but we had active listening. And then just the titles of these workshops: Expanding Horizons, how you become so aware and you're eager, and self-confidence, and then you're expanding, and what next, and where do I go from here was one, and how to be me, and life planning. So it was just it was life-changing for me. It was wonderful. And after those 2 years, then for 8 more years following that, I led workshops. I had training to be a peer group leader. And I lived in Ishpeming and Negaunee area. And there was, I thought, a great deal of difference in people, overall people who lived in Negaunee and Ishpeming compared to people living in Marquette and belonging to the university population and so on.
Excuse me, Norma, was the office still on campus when you were doing this?
Yes.
Initially? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll mention that Ishpeming and Negaunee are slightly more rural, definitely
Yes.
smaller than Marquette, but
Yes.
pretty connected.
Right. And at that time, I think the word feminist was a bad word to a lot of people. It was frightening, and changes. And so when I was able to do some of these workshops in my own community with people I'd known for years, and raised children with them, and worked with them at softball games and fundraisers, and gone to church with them, they trusted me as one of them and came to learn. And learned that equality is just such a basic thing. It doesn't have to be frightening. And then all of these communication skills about expressing yourself, asking for what you need, being direct, not playing games to get what you want. So it was just a great experience for me. And so during all this time I was also taking classes at Northern, and at the end of that 10-year span, I had been remarried and had another child, had a daughter, and took some time off to take care of that. And so when I finally graduated from Northern, and I was 37 years old, I had a final project I had to do for an accounting instructor that involved putting my resume together, and I was so proud to put 10 years of experience and all this growth, and what a wonderful employee I could be. And when I got that back, he said, you'd better take all of that off of there. You'd better not show that you're involved with the Women's Center, because the people who will be looking at your resume and interviewing you are going to be white middle-aged males who do not have a positive concept of that. It's going to be a negative. And you would be better off if you said you sat home and watched soap operas for 10 years than to have that on there. So I graduated, and I did not want to change my resume. I was proud of it, but I couldn't go out and bring it. I wanted to bring it to the 3 CPA firms that were in Ishpeming. So for about 3 weeks I was home just licking my wounds and figuring out what I would do with it.
Now, your degree was in accounting?
Yes, a major in accounting. So, and then as life goes, it was so wonderful for me the day that I decided to just leave my resume the way it was and brought it to these 3 CPA firms. The one was a person the owner of the CPA firm had gone to the same church I did and had known me for some time, and was calling me as I drove in my driveway and came home asking me to come in for an interview. And I was hired there, and I had 25 years. I had a wonderful time working there, a good experience, much more than I ever thought I was going to do. And he was curious about my experiences and the things I had on my resume. And sometimes in manager meetings, he would pull out the word assertiveness. And I could tell the way he was using it that he was mixing it up with aggressiveness. You know, many people do. Many people think if you're an assertive woman that you are more aggressive. And the definitions of being passive and aggressive and assertive, you know, once you learn them, you can be very assertive without being aggressive. But he did see that as a good thing, and he saw that as a great management skill, and I'd have to tone him back and say, well, being assertive means this, and this is, if it were me, this is how I would handle it, and he grew to value that very much. It was a great, I used all those skills as I worked with these manager meetings. I was also very maternal, very nurturing, and would think of my own children and their careers as I worked with these young managers.
Well, and you were also combining or helping them realize the two could go together.
Exactly.
You and I have talked that being a homemaker, you develop valuable skills, and the nurturing part of managing children in a home can carry over into a positive in your business work.
It was how I figured out how to handle difficult situations. I would say, if this is my son in this situation at work, how would I wish that their supervisors would handle it? So, yes, that did. And also the organizational skills that I had to develop over the years to run my home, raise my family, caring for family members who had health issues. I helped people over the years. So I read a wonderful book on time management, and prioritizing was involved in many of the workshops I took also. And that was how I was able to transfer those skills then to being a good employee also. I had good organization skills and very responsible, and found I could do it all. It was fun.
Excellent. I want you to move on ahead, but you've mentioned so many of the different classes and workshops. Do you remember any of the key leaders, or does anybody stand out?
I have lists of them. I still have my materials.
Really, I noticed that you read the
Yes.
mission there, and I'm eager to see that. I haven't
Okay.
seen the printed. If you could, because we've interviewed some, but I'm also
Okay.
looking to
And I
follow
don't think
up.
I brought those with me today.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'll get them to you. But I brought with me, I had been interviewed, this was in February of 1983, an interview for a local newsletter someplace, I don't remember. But just reading it over, and I went, wow, it's just what I've said today already is what I said then. And so I guess that's kind of my story. I met so many people with diverse backgrounds. Being born and raised in Negaunee and Ishpeming, that was eye-opening for me also. That was, and the acceptance then. There were women with all different backgrounds and all different goals of where they wanted to go and what, at times people could be a little bit judgmental about where is that fine line of are you being passive or are you being assertive? My level of comfort, learning how to be assertive from somebody who never even knew what the word meant. I was very passive, so it was baby steps for me, and I had great pride in each step that I took, and learned how to. It came naturally then, but that was, I guess, something that still carries over. And looking at the children I raised 2 sons and a daughter, and my daughter is a great example of, I think, an assertive woman. She's a career person. She's chosen to not be married and doesn't have children. Lives in a big city, and I'm very, very proud of her. And she's made some different choices than I have, but I think she's happy. And I have 2 sons who are very, very good to their partners, and that makes me real proud. They're very supportive. My husband now was very supportive all along. Met me in the middle of all this growth. Met me in the middle of all my excitement, and we were just friends at the time, so we would talk and talk and talk. And
Did you feel he was an exception to the rule, to your experience in terms of a man supporting this kind of growth in his wife or friend?
well, I guess he had very old-fashioned values. He came from a very conservative family and had kind of gone along those lines himself. When he met me, I think some of my thinking was radical but he also knew me as a very gentle and kind and generous person. He knew that I was intelligent enough to run my life and make my decisions. So as we then became involved, it was always, I never wanted to give the impression I was selling out and becoming dependent, giving up some of my hard-won independence. But I think it made him very comfortable of my being the mother to his daughter, and him having a daughter changed him a great deal too. A person who maybe hasn't thought about being a feminist or equality, a man who has a daughter he loves becomes a feminist. And
I like that story because he's sort of in between some
yeah.
that couldn't make the transition. We've talked in some of the other interviews of how difficult it was for men whose cultural background was the man's role is and the
Right.
woman's role. Even those who were open-minded had a hard time
Yes.
adjusting to
It was a
that.
huge change. And some of the literature I was looking through this morning in my files, at the time that the Women's Center first opened, one of their big projects was helping women to get hired in Cleveland Cliffs Mining Company, the mines in the area, the best paying jobs in the area. And they were just starting to hire their first women in the mines. And one of the articles I have here is because one of the first things that happened is some of the men there drilled a peephole into the women's shower room, and the women had to file complaints and go through the channels to get that corrected. And the attitude was, you're taking jobs away from men. Men who are supporting families need these jobs, and the women shouldn't have them. So that was all brand new and starting, and it didn't go easily for those women who.
Was there a movie with that theme, North Country or
Yes, there
something,
was.
which showed, you
It was in
mentioned
the Minnesota mines.
Yes.
And yes, it was. It was. I asked my husband at the time, because he was an engineer in the mines. He worked in the mines, and asked him, "Did you see this? And was this a real experience?" And the attitude, and yeah, it was.
Right.
Yeah.
And while certainly not agreeing with it, it was understandable in the sense that, and it wasn't on the radar that, hey, there might be a woman who's having to support her family.
Exactly. And the idea that a woman might be able to support a family without the man was very frightening, because so many women stuck in difficult situations only because they couldn't afford to support their family the way they thought they should. It was a lot of power and control over them when they had the better jobs.
Now, were you still involved as they transitioned from Northern to the church and then other to,
Yes.
yeah. How did you view that? Because I know it was challenging financially, but
See, as I said earlier, I became so involved with this small part of the Women's Center. I did sit on their board for 1 year, and that was in 1983. And I found I don't enjoy that part of any organization. I love the democratic process, and everybody has the opportunity to give their opinion, give their ideas. You filter through it all, you battle it all out, and you come out with the best decisions you can as a board. I was so impatient, and I just didn't enjoy that at all, and I came to the conclusion that I would rather be a worker bee, even if it wasn't my first choice of the decisions they made. I couldn't stand sitting in those meetings, or the church board or any of those others. It wasn't my cup of tea. So I admire so greatly all the big issues and all the big things they had to handle. Funding for the center to keep the center going was one of them. And as that happened, at the end of my involvement with the Women's Center, my husband and I volunteered at their bingo games to help raise money. And that was a big deal for my husband, to represent publicly the Women's Center, and he was proud of it, and I was so proud of him that he did it. But I didn't then continue. Once I got my career going, and it started out to be a part-time job. It turned into a great big job, and I loved it, and I worked long hours, and I didn't have anything left to give then.
You had to prioritize again.
Yes, I did. Yes.
The skills stayed with you
Yeah.
throughout. One of the things that's come up in many interviews is the value or the importance of reaffirming all that's happened over the last, 40 years for women, because perhaps your daughter, maybe taking it for granted is too strong a term, but they don't realize what it took to break those barriers. What's your sense of that from your experience? Do you think we need to keep revisiting these issues?
Absolutely, I do. I think that how would they know? How would they know? They weren't there. They wouldn't know. And I guess as I was going through this, wondering about how much of all of this my kids really know about me, because they were little, and I was just there making sure everything was running well. So I think that it's a wonderful thing to revisit, and I think as I was going through this material, thinking maybe now is the time. I've been trying to dispose of this. I have a table in my living room with a lot of files full of newspaper clippings and paperwork that I have decided to dispose of many times, and my husband laughs because I'll sit on the floor in the living room through a long winter blizzard and take everything out and say, I'm going to throw this away now, I'm just going to go through it one more time. And I can't throw it away. It was just such an important thing, and it is good to remind me also. I still get into situations in my life where I think I can be sitting and fretting and stewing, and I'm not using some skills that I definitely have, and not taking control of some situations that I can. So why would I dispose of these?
And this is a real aside, but I'm involved with a group that's doing memoirs now, and we will be giving you a copy of this, but you might want to put that on paper for your children, because we find people are interested in those things, particularly family. And I've questions about my own family that I wished I'd ask.
Yes.
Never knew to ask at that
Yeah.
that point. But this is excellent. The Women's Center now, from interviews, again, I'm not actively involved, is having to focus on survival is probably too strong a word, but the financial issues don't go away. The mission has then had to retract a little. But if you were looking ahead personally from your own experience, what would you hope for the Women's Center? Where do you feel the strengths were? It's kind of obvious from what you've said, but
Right. Yeah, I guess I wonder how many people who went through the Women's Center and the workshops and what they had to offer had the same experience I did. And if so, I mean, for me, I just think that would be a way to make better communities, better families, better employees. It's just such a great way to help people. So I guess I am just totally biased about that. I think it's teaching people such valuable skills and helping us to deal with life in such healthy ways, and raise children who are aware of healthy ways to deal with life. And even then, we certainly have had our experiences too with not everything is perfect all the time, and you have your trials and tribulations and your heartbreaks. But the difference between the person that I became after all of this and the person I was before was so big. So I guess I'm just totally biased that way. But I also enjoyed all of the benefits of their hard work, of women being accepted and respected, women moving into different job markets, and the legislation changing in such a big way. So I don't know how to answer.
well,
If
you are by example a good answer. And somebody pointed out to me we're in April of 2014 that equal pay is still an issue, and it's being discussed as promoting more legislation or adding on or changing. So the issues are not going to go away, and we need to keep in touch with those.
And money issues are worse than ever.
Yes.
Government, every level, our local level, our roads are falling apart. I'm wondering how are they going to come up with all the money they need for all the services, all the programs. So that's going to be a challenge.
It is an issue. Norma, we've touched on a lot of things, but is there anything we've overlooked that you'd like to comment on, either in your personal experience or about the women's movement?
I guess maybe just in closing, one of the workshops that I took when we started was dealing with careers and expanding horizons and so on. And we did some career exploration kind of work, and I was mortified. My highest scores came back as executive housekeeper. And I looked, and I was in a room full of very professional women. I was so embarrassed by it, but it took me time to value that. That was all I knew. I had never had any experience with education or with employment or anything else. I'd worked as a bank teller other than being a parent. I guess the idea of valuing who we are, that self-acceptance and taking those skills and then not being afraid to grow, having confidence to add on to that. I guess I liked feeling like I represented a population of women who were trying to just be happy and fulfilled. Well, we're just managing our lives. We're managing responsibilities, families, hopefully healthy relationships and aging parents, but all of those skills that we used then, that we learned then, whether they were for personal reasons or for professional reasons, whatever, just valuable.
Carried over, absolutely.
Yes.
And I liked your comments that you had to learn that, that was something that could be valued, and you were not alone. I mean, most women didn't realize that they were doing something pretty special to keep the roof on the house.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your comments. This has been wonderful, and you are a model of what the Women's Center is all about. And I'm putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like they made a total difference in your life. Having that contact directed you in ways you might not have explored. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I'll show you this. There we go.